Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I have for you my new bullet journal setup for the second half of 2025. I can't believe we are rapidly approaching the halfway point of the year. I myself love watching new bullet journal setups, so I hope you will enjoy this one too. We are first making the grid spacing guide, and I just skipped the first awkward page that is stuck to the cover and opened to the first full spread. For the second half of the year, I again am using a Notebook Therapy original size notebook, which is a little smaller than an A5. This is my second time using the original size. I also used one for the first half of the year, but I still wanted to include a grid spacing guide at the beginning because it is very useful. I refer to it quite often and it's just nice to include as part of your bullet journal. I feel like this is quite a minimal way of doing a grid spacing guide. I didn't write the numbers along the sides like I normally do. I just made the little dots dividing the lines and wrote how many spaces it is. There is not much else going on this page. It is mainly the page divisions and the grid spacing title that I wrote in cursive. On the right page, we are making a kind of a cover to the second half of 2025. I am drawing a scene of a mystical-ish forest with the main focus being mushrooms. I like to make the themes of my beginning of the year setups somewhat related to the cover of the notebook, mainly because it is kind of difficult to come up with the theme, and this way I don't really need to think and it just makes everything cohesive. I was on an emotional roller coaster making this painting. My favorite medium to paint with, and the medium I think I work with the best, is watercolor, but Notebook Therapy's paper is just not made for watercolor, so I decided to go with gouache, which I have limited experience with. I didn't even know what gouache paints were a few years back. I didn't study art. The furthest I went with art in terms of education was GCSE art. I was just a kid who liked drawing, so I'm still learning with gouache, and this painting definitely tested my patience and my trust in the process. I think all together for the setup I had like 3.5 hours of footage, which is a lot of footage than I normally go through because my setups aren't usually this painting heavy. So yeah, it took a long time to make and even longer to edit, so I hope you enjoy the final results. I tried so many paintbrushes at the beginning and I just couldn't find the right one. I think I went through like 3 or 4 paintbrushes before I landed on the one I used for the rest of the setup, so you might see that the lines in the beginning might not be as crisp because the first paintbrush I used was a little frayed. I tried my best to keep the bristles together, but some parts were a little messy. Even though I spent over 3 hours with this setup, I kind of wish I spent even more time on the cover page. I feel like I could have added a little more depth and dimension, added some darker parts to the background, because looking back at it now and even when I was painting it, I feel like it's a little flat. When I film these setup videos, you guys don't see the behind the scenes, but I'm in all kinds of weird positions to try to get around a tripod to paint, but also place the camera in my hands in such a way that my hand won't block what I'm doing on the page, so it gets a little difficult to paint sometimes, and my joints always ache from being in blood flow restricting positions for long periods of time. The thing with gouache is that I think it's like the perfect medium between watercolor and acrylic. I really do not like acrylic, by the way. I feel like it just dries way too fast and you need quite a lot of paint to get like a smooth layer. With watercolor, I can just re-wet the paint over and over again, so I can really take my time mixing the exact color I want, and a bit of paint goes a long way. Gouache has that similar characteristic where I can keep re-wetting the paint, but it is a lot more opaque and harder to blend. With watercolor, you almost have to keep the colors from blending, so I feel like watercolor is a very lazy and easy medium, but I do also appreciate the look of gouache, so I do want to practice using it more. I recently had a comment asking where my notebook is from, and any notebook or stationery I used in my videos will always be listed in the description, so you can always find them there. But this notebook, as well as my last bullet journal, is from Notebook Therapy. I contemplated for a really long time before I ordered this particular notebook because it has a velvet cover. When I order from Notebook Therapy, I always go with the linen cover, but because I don't really like the gold gilded pages, and this was one of the only few designs left that didn't have the gold edges, I decided to try out the velvet cover, and I don't know if I'm entirely happy with that decision. It's already attracting so much dust and scuffs, and I have a cockatiel who is a very dusty bird, so the cover is already starting to annoy me, but let's see how it holds up until the end of the year. At the bottom, instead of writing 2025 or like July to December, I simply stamped out part 2 to indicate that this is the second half of the year and we are done with our cover page. Moving on to the future log, I started off with writing the months at the top of the page. I've been getting more and more comfortable with writing cursive. I used to not be very good at this, and I used to have to look up fonts and references, outline it with a pencil and all of that, but now I'm getting to the point where I'm comfortable just freehanding it, which I never thought I'll get to. It's not perfect and it's not the prettiest, but I'm really proud of the improvements I've made so far and will continue practicing further. Underneath the months, I made gray bars with a Mildliner, and then I wrote in Monday to Sunday on top of them. This is a little hack, by the way. If you want something highlighted, instead of highlighting over the text, put down the highlight first and then write on top of it. This way you avoid the highlighter from picking up the ink from the pen strokes and just keeps everything neat and tidy. At the bottom of the right page, I'm including a box titled Next Year for all those events that are happening next year, and this is where I can put them. Then we are making decorations to the bottom corners of both pages, and you can see my gouache palette to the side there. Fun fact, I've never actually washed out this palette. I just keep adding paint to it. One, because I'm lazy and cleaning paint palettes is a hassle, but also I don't think it really needs it, and it's fun to try to utilize the space and the colors that is left on the palette. It's almost like a game, and it's a layer of fun added to creating art. I did this with my watercolor palette for the longest time. That thing has not been washed in literal years, and I think that's one more reason why I don't really like acrylic, because when acrylic dries, it just dries and it's sad, but peeling it off is also something I find very enjoyable within itself. The squiggly fern looking things that I'm painting now were my favorite thing to paint in this entire setup. I've talked a lot about how I like drawing plants and things from nature because it's an organic thing. There's no right or wrong way to draw something organic. And if you are new to drawing or want to practice art, then drawing plants is something I really recommend because no matter what, it's gonna come out looking somewhat decent. At least that's what I do if I don't know what to draw or I feel down about my art lately. I'll just draw a plant and that seems to give me momentum to keep creating. And making this setup kind of made me realize that I haven't really drawn mushrooms before, like ever. I don't recall having drawn mushrooms before, which hearing that out of my mouth just now sounds utterly ridiculous. I feel like mushrooms are such basic things that surely I have incorporated them in a design somewhere, but I just genuinely cannot recall having to move my hands in such a way to create this particular shape I'm doing here. But my memory is also atrocious and cannot be trusted, so I might have drawn them at some point in my life, but I just forgotten, I guess. And that is my future log done, well, mostly done. I do realize that I've never actually finished writing in the days at the top of each calendar. I know that might be really annoying some of you right now. I'm sorry, I did write it in after the video, so it's all completed now. But for now, we're moving on to a spread I always include in my bullet journal aside from the future log, and that is my cycle tracker. I did stamp out the title wrong, but we covered that with a white gel pen and I stamped on the correct letter. On top of that, at the top I wrote down the first letter of each month, and then on the side here I'm writing down my keys. Then I wrote in the numbers 1 to 31. In my last bullet journal, I did this for all 6 months. I don't know why on earth did I do that, so this time we're writing the numbers just once and then we'll make dots to represent the days in each month. In the space that is left here, we're drawing more mushrooms, and if you're a girl, having this spread or some other form of tracking your cycle makes your life so much easier. You'll start to see patterns and understand yourself so much better, because as much as I want to be at my 100% every single day, that's just not the case. In reality, my body and my energy is changing according to my cycle, and being aware of that and understanding it and accepting it just makes your life so much better, and it's especially useful for planning trips to the beach. I've tried using apps on my phone before, but I feel like apps makes it so much more complicated than it needs to be. Nothing beats a simple spread in my bullet journal. The page next to my cycle tracker is my mood tracker, or as some people like to call it, a year in pixels. Well, I guess in this case is like a half the year in pixels. The layout to this spread is pretty much mirrored to the cycle tracker, and the reason I laid it out pretty much the same is so that I can really see the patterns of like the ups and the downs of my mood and how that correlates to my cycle. I once did a year in pixels like at the very beginning when I started bullet journaling and failed miserably and never did it again until this year. I was bold enough to attempt a year in pixels again for the first half of 2025, and while there are definitely some dots missing, I think I did quite well and stuck through most of it, so I'm doing one again for the second half of the year, hopefully with no missing dots this time. And speaking of my previous bullet journal, if you guys are waiting to see a flip through, it is coming. I will be doing a flip through. I just need to get this video out and then my July setup, and then we'll get to the flip through. This video has been a long time in the making. I actually filmed it like 2 weeks ago before I went on a trip to Pattaya, and then when I came back I was hit with this wave of like low mood, low energy, low motivation just from my own life events and what's going on in the world. I talked a bit more about it on my other channel, which I always have linked in the description in case you want to hang out with me more, because I only post like a bullet journal setup once a month on here. The other channel is more like vlogs and my life and all of that. I'm starting to post a lot more on there, so if you're interested, the link is in the description. I will be very happy to see you there. The next spread we are setting up is a wish list. I actually don't know if I've ever included a wish list spread in my bullet journal before. When I want something, I'll just heart it on a shopping site or like put it in my notes app, but I've never had a physical wish list. For this page, I just wrote items, dates, and then boxes with a tick and a cross to indicate if I ended up getting that item or not. And beneath the headings, I made gray lines, and at first I intended to make the lines all the way down the page, but I simply gave up after realizing how difficult and time-consuming that's going to be. I don't know how useful this spread will be. My plan is to just write down everything I have a random urge to buy on this page, and also write down a date where if I still want that item by that date, then I can go ahead and get it, or alternatively cross it off the list. But for certain things I want, I contemplate them for months and even years, and since I will probably use this notebook for only 6 months, I don't know if it's realistic to include a wish list. But with that being said, with some things, especially if it's a smaller purchase, I can be quite impulsive, so I think this wish list will be more useful for things like that. And one of my big goals for the second half of the year is to be more intentional with the things I own and bring into my life. And speaking of being more intentional, the spread next to my wish list is going to be a decluttering challenge that I will be doing throughout the second half of the year. My goal is to declutter 3 items per day, every single day. It's just something I came up with. I feel like it's an intensity that I can actually stick to. But saying that, 3 items per day for half a year, it's like 540 items. I don't think I physically have that many things to get rid of, so I did leave 3 good spaces for each day, but if I at least do 1 item per day, I will consider that a success. A big thing for me will definitely be clothes. I have some clothing items I haven't worn for literal years. I've been putting off clearing them out for a really long time, and I think it's time to finally deal with it. The final spread we'll be making in this setup is something I'm calling Check This Out. This is for all the books and movies and TV shows I've heard about somewhere or from someone telling me about them. This is where they can live in my bullet journal. I do have a TBR on Notion, which feels like a never-ending list, whereas this is a nice way for me to keep track of the things I'm reading next, because when I finish a book, I feel almost lost and my huge TBR list feels super overwhelming. This is a much smaller, less intimidating list. Having a list for movies and TV shows you want to watch is also super useful. When I turn on Netflix, there's endless amounts of things to watch on there, and it's like decision fatigue, so I can refer to this list to save myself the time and the headache of trying to scroll through all of them. Things I will put down on here would probably already be researched and decided by me that it is something worth watching. I also had a fourth section titled Other, which will be for like games or snacks or skincare and all of that stuff. I erased all the pencil lines and made some sparkles all around the titles as they were looking a little lonely. This is a nice way to make things look more busy, like more personalized, I guess. Let's finally flip through all the spreads we made today. Looking back at all these pages, I'm actually quite happy with them, but I probably won't be doing this much painting in my bullet journal again anytime soon. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. My vlogging channel is linked down below if you're interested. Have a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Bye!